today for our presentation on the use of large language models in developing and refining interview protocols. In case you're interested, our research manuscript, which outlines all of the methods and results that we discussed today, was just published in the qualitative report, which is open access. You can go to the qualitative report and look at their most recent issue, or you can use this link to locate the full text of the article. A little bit of information about us. So I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Veronica Richard. I'm Jessica Parker. I'm the founder and CEO of Dissertation by Design and Academic Insight Lab. And Dr. Veronica Richard is my lead qualitative methodologist. She was integral to this research. And then although Kimberly is not here to present live with us, she is here with us in spirit. A little bit about me. I'm a health sciences educator and interdisciplinary researcher. I have become totally captivated by the potential of generative AI models and large language models like ChatGPT for all sorts of applications, ranging from personalized learning to developing data collection tools such as interview protocols. I'm even exploring aspects of data analysis. Veronica, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I am Veronica, and I work a lot with clients on developing their research plan and methodology overall. But specifically, interview protocols come up a lot. And so I'm really excited for this information here to be really a guide for students and early career people. And actually, I was just writing up an interview for someone the other day, and I used it. So I think that there's definitely some value here for us, as we'll see here. Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah. And in case you're not familiar with our company, so Dissertation by Design is an academic coaching firm. We are full service. We have qualitative methodologists like Dr. Veronica Richard, statisticians, and editors. And we work on really all types of research documents. We primarily work with PhD candidates on theses and dissertations, but we also, a lot of our clients graduate and go on to become professors. And so we also help them with their research after they graduate. Okay, let's dive in. So some information about the background. So if you are a qualitative researcher and you have developed an interview protocol before, you know how time intensive it can be. It is an art and a science. It requires us to consider sort of a lot of different variables. We're thinking about alignment between our interview questions and our research questions. There's ethical considerations involved. We're also concerned about the validity of the instrument itself, making sure that the types of questions we're asking are going to give us the results we want in order to answer our research questions. And through this, we're typically going through multiple rounds of revision. We also like to pilot our interview protocols, and sometimes that has its own challenges. And so if you've developed one before, then you're probably well familiar with these challenges and how long it can take to develop a really good interview protocol that's going to elicit the responses you need in order to answer your research questions. And so that's what really inspired us. We've seen all this research coming out about the potential of these large language models. And we just thought, you know, what if it could really help us solve this kind of problem that we experience often as qualitative researchers in terms of not just developing the interview protocols, but also getting feedback on them and piloting them, especially when we don't want to squander our sample population. And so we just kind of wondered, like, can ChatGPT aid researchers in this process? And we worked within the framework of Castillo-Montoya's interview protocol refinement framework. And here's a visual adaptation of that, where phase one is alignment. You're looking to create a matrix to align your interview questions with your research questions. And then you're developing an inquiry-based conversation. Then you're getting feedback. Typically, we would get that feedback from a human, but we are proposing that ChatGPT could role play as the type of subject matter expert or human you need to get feedback. And then also pilot testing. We would normally do that with someone who closely mirrors our sample population or having to use someone in our sample population. And so we thought this is a large language model capable of producing human-like output. And so perhaps ChatGPT could also serve as someone to pilot the interview protocol with. And so that's what really we set out to do, was to work through each of these phases using ChatGPT to help us better understand what its capabilities and what its limitations were in all of these phases. And we learned quite a bit. In terms of just ChatGPT itself, I'll just give you a little bit of background information in case it's helpful. So it is a large language model. It's built using billions of parameters of text. The way it works is it predicts the next word. It's basically just a predictive model. It's not lifting entire phrases or sentences from a specific source text. It's not, until recently, there is a new version that's connected to the internet, but the version we used was not connected to the internet. And its responses do sound like a human. And so that's part of why we thought, it might be perfect for this reason. We used it to work through each of the 4 phases, and then we analyzed its output throughout each phase. And we also considered the types of prompts that we were using, and we'll share those with you. So within the manuscript, you'll be able to see in one table our input prompt sequence, but we just want to give you an idea of the input prompts we used, because prompting is important. There's a whole new field of research that's evolving on prompt engineering. And so the way you prompt ChatGPT does matter. It will influence the quality of the output. And so in phase 1, we used, I won't read this out loud, but we created a prompt. We gave it information about its role in the context and what we were looking for. We specified the output, where we said create a matrix that shows how the interview questions map onto the research questions. We then went on to prompt it to create an inquiry-based conversation that follows, social rules of ordinary conversation with a variety of questions. And then you can see our other prompts for each phase. And these prompts are important, which, by the way, we're not saying that you have to prompt it in this exact way, but the level of detail we provide in the initial prompts, the level of detail we provide about what we want in the output, again, that speaks to the quality of the output you're going to get. And so that prompting is important. And I think the more we can share our prompts, the better. And so I think that's important when you're conducting research, is to share the prompts you're using to generate output with the chatbot. So I'm going to let Veronica take over now. She's going to talk about what we've learned within each phase.
Yeah, and Jessica, I just want to mention something. If you could go back 2 slides for the first prompt, I just wanted to point out one of the things that we did is we also connected in a theoretical model. And this was important because it influenced the output. Okay, so I just wanted to mention that, and especially for those who are using a model to guide your research, this is really important here. So you might just pay attention to that, and then I'll mention that again a little bit later.
Perfect.
Thank you. So yeah, in phase 1, ChatGPT basically produced our questions for us based off of that prompt, and then we did a follow-up prompt for the matrix. Okay, so first was the list of interview questions, and then it came up with this matrix. It was very fast. I mean, we could tell right away when something wasn't going on, and which we did in this case. We found that the main or primary research question was not addressed. So that was huge, and it enabled us to go back and think critically about our prompting and about what it was that we were hoping to find out on that primary question. And so really on this part, we already started to learn the importance of our prompting and the importance of being critical of the output. On the second phase, what we asked it to do is to conduct or construct the questions and the prompts in a more inquiry-based conversation. So what you're seeing here is the outline, if you will, to not only the protocol, but also to the TAM model. And that's why I wanted to mention that, because some of the areas that it has is bolded are in relationship to the TAM model. So we can see how the chatbot is organizing things and give us ideas of, is that how we want to organize things, or do we want to organize it in a different way? In this output here, we definitely saw that the key questions and some follow-up questions were provided. This is a good thing. Now, can they be better? Yes, they can. And so we noticed that the introductory and the transitional and the closing prompts just weren't quite what we wanted. And then we saw a lot of closed questions, and sometimes I can't remember if it was on this one, but sometimes it also would do a double barrel question where it's asking two questions at once, right? So we started noticing those types of instances and noting what we needed to do, either ourselves as researchers to craft the questions or to reprompt ChatGPT. In the third area, we used the role-playing feature of ChatGPT and asked it to be to analyze. So they were the, let's say, the evaluator of the protocol. And what was nice about this is it was instant feedback. We were able to see what ChatGPT thought as far as aligning with the checklist provided by Castillo Montoya. The suggestions for improvement were okay, but that was almost always positive. Everything was positive about this on the output. And we were really looking for that critical insight. And so we recognized that this was something that we really needed to either provide further prompting or take it from here and be critical about the output and say, well, it said we did this, but in actuality, this question here isn't aligning. So this is where we really started to see that the large language models and tools that are similar to ChatGPT definitely have potential, but we really need to have a piece in the constructing of whatever it is that we're constructing, be it protocols or even in our data analysis. We did in this phase, sorry, Jessica, I just wanted to mention, we did it and get a better critical feedback on this particular phase. So that also shows us that the better we are at putting an input, so that prompt, the better output we get. And I think, Jessica, you and I've been talking about this, like when we're asking something and it's not quite right, we're not going to get what we're wanting back.
Yeah, the more detailed and specific we can be, and that requires us as researchers to have clarity about what we're looking for. And so I know that that can be a really big hurdle for novice researchers who are really just learning how to conduct research and how to develop protocols. And so I've been saying in all of these, this is our third presentation on large language models and generative AI. And in all of them, I'm saying the same thing about like garbage in, garbage out. And so if you're giving it garbage, quote unquote garbage, so if you give it a really poor interview protocol that's not aligned, it can't do but so much with what you're giving it. And so the more details you can give it about what you're looking for and as much context as possible. And then that's also where the chatbot really shines. It is a chatbot. So you can have this multi-turn dialogue. You can keep going back and forth to ask for explanations or clarification or alternative wordings. You could say, hey, what are 5 different ways I can ask this question? Or I'm concerned about this sort of cultural aspect of my sample. How might I word this differently to make sure it doesn't offend someone in this type of, with this type of background? And so that's what's great is you can go back and forth as many times as you want. You can go off on your own and revise the questions and then come back to it again and start fresh. Yeah, I'll just stop there. so we don't go off.
No, that's perfect.
Keep
And then I
going.
just also wanted to mention that in the follow-up prompt we started, or the follow-up prompts that ChatGPT produced, were less than optimal throughout these phase 2 and phase 3. But we also acknowledge that as researchers, we often tailor those follow-up prompts by what's being said back to us, right? And so we also recognize the dynamic aspect of an interview protocol. And something like a chatbot's not going to be able to respond in that way, the way that is to the best that we need it. So we still have this critical role. Okay, the fourth phase. This phase here we were very excited about, because we work with clients all the time who have small samples, who are struggling to get other people who match their sample criteria. And in this case, ChatGPT is able to respond like the participants that we are looking to include in our study. This is super, super beneficial for us, especially in qualitative research where in, let's say, special education areas or other health areas that the samples are limited. We don't want to use our sample to try out our protocols. So this is definitely a way to do that. The pilot did, lack a nuanced understanding, and the context wasn't always exactly what it maybe would be, but we really saw some great benefits here. One of the things that I found is that it forced me to look critical at the questions and the responses to see if the question is actually eliciting the response that I need to address my research questions. So this also gives us another area to use our critical thinking and to make changes as we see fit.
Yeah, and from an educator's perspective, like I teach a research methods class where I do have the students, they're learning. And so I have them create an interview protocol. I have them pilot it with a peer in the class. And then I have them practice their learning how to analyze qualitative data. And so I think about the applications in that scenario where maybe if the entire focus isn't the actual interview protocol itself, like being able to instantly pilot it and have, data to practice your data analysis skills. So there's applications there as well.
Hey, Jessica, we had a question in the chat. I did respond, but she said, what version did we use?
Yeah, so the version is important. So we used, we have 3 different manuscripts right now. I think we used GPT-4.
Did we? I thought we used 3.5.
3.5. Maybe it was 3.5. Yeah, because I think we did this before GPT-4 was out. I think we did it says it in the manuscript. Just double check. We have a bunch of different studies going on right now, so it's hard to keep them straight. But to give you an idea, 3.5 is similar. Its advanced reasoning skills and abilities are in line with maybe like a 9th grade high school student, whereas GPT-4 is right up there with like a first-year PhD student. And so I do think if you're using these tools for advanced purposes, this would be a great example. GPT-4 is going to give you much higher quality output, especially if you're having doing these complex tasks such as role playing. But yeah, we were able to generate this. I'm pretty sure now it was 3.5. Yeah.
Awesome. So our key findings are these: generates contextually appropriate questions and simulates real life interviews. This is dependent although on our prompting. So we need to make sure that in our prompting, we are providing this context, and you can use our examples in the manuscript as a starting place for identifying the role, the context, and then the output that we are wanting from the chatbot. This is very, very important as we move forward. The second key finding is that this really streamlines the process. It definitely saves us time and energy and resources. And I believe it also it increases our ability, or our opportunities at least, to be critical of our work. And then finally, the chatbots like ChatGPT can adapt to the research context and cultural considerations that we include in our prompting. But again, if we're not being good enough with our prompt, or being comprehensive, I guess, then the output isn't going to reflect that as much. Jessica, you want to talk through this one?
Sure. Yeah, so this is a table we created. This is in our manuscript. And we really just highlighted this as kind of a starting point for our next manuscript, which we're writing right now, these considerations. So like I said, we're working on a manuscript to fully expand these considerations, but it's important to think about like cultural sensitivity and the quality of the output, focusing on these large language models as a tool to help you augment your approach, not automate or replace your expertise. It's important to educate yourself. We're calling this now AI literacy, to fully understand the capabilities and limitations of these models. ChatGPT is different from Bard, is different from Bing. Some are connected to the internet. There's different versions available. So it's important for you to understand what these models are capable of. And we're also going to think about, in this next manuscript, like how AI can be used in qualitative data analysis. When I look at this table, I think one of the more challenging areas, particularly because this is such a new field, is this idea of quality of output is challenging. We're still learning really how to evaluate the output. And obviously what we're looking for depends on what we're using it for. So what I'm looking to evaluate in the output will be very different for an interview protocol versus something for statistical analysis using the advanced data analysis feature. And so having clarity on the output you're looking for will give you more clarity on what you're evaluating the output for, to make sure that it's high quality. I think it's important to establish like some benchmarks, but I think this is also challenging because of how rapidly these tools are evolving. Part of my confusion around 3.5 or 4 is because we just started doing this research in March, and we've already worked with 3 different versions. We started with 3 and then moved on to 3.5, and now we're using 4. And the capabilities are vastly different. I can immediately tell a difference between 3.5 and 4. And so it's hard. Like, we don't know if what we're talking about now in terms of implications are going to hold true in a couple of months when there's a more advanced version available. And so that's part of the challenge, especially as researchers, is making sure that we're really focusing on this idea of what version are we using, what it's capable of, and being really clear about how we're evaluating it would be helpful for future research. There's a ton.
Jessica, oh, I'm sorry. Someone asked, because you were on the topic, how do you keep up with the everything that's going on with AI? What do you read? Is there something that, because I know that you're more steeped into it than I am, so what would you recommend?
So I follow a lot of generative AI thought leaders on LinkedIn. So Ethan Mullick, depending on your field, so he's a Wharton professor. He has a wonderful Substack that he updates regularly. It's very much from an educational perspective about how we're preparing future graduates, how we're equipping them with AI literacy, how we're integrating generative AI models like ChatGPT into the classroom. And so I think seeking out some of those well-respected, reputable thought leaders online. I personally use LinkedIn. There's several who I follow. I'm also have been talking to so many people about this that I'm now getting people who are just sending me different reports and blogs and videos. I don't have a perfect answer. It's incredibly overwhelming. I think that right now, unless someone is involved from a data science perspective or involved in building these AI models, we really can't claim that you're an expert. I can't claim that I'm an expert right now. I really consider myself like an enthusiast who's committed to trying to stay up to date and and vetting these tools as much as possible. But there's really no single go-to source that I have found. I'm really following several influential thought leaders to help stay on top of things. But over at Academic Insight Lab, we are committed to this. And so that's our sister Dissertation by Design sister company. We're building AI tools for academic purposes, and we're regularly publishing videos online about different AI tools, not just ChatGPT. So we use different research assistants such as Elicit, Cite AI, Litmaps. So we're constantly vetting these tools, and we're trying to be a go-to source, but even we're having trouble keeping up because we're not, we're a very small business. We're not a huge team. So it's a lot for one person or a small team to take on, for sure.
Christina says it takes a village.
It really does. It does. In terms of future directions, and so what gave us inspiration for this specific study is I work with doc students. Veronica works with most of our qualitative clients at Dissertation by Design. And so I want to pilot this. I want to compare its output to human benchmarks to really start evaluating the quality of the output. We're working right now to develop guidelines for qualitative researchers. And then we also developed an AI tool ourselves using this exact prompt sequence and framework. And the way our AI tools work is you answer some simple questions in the beginning to give the model context for training the model. And then we have a series of prompt automation set up. So for this specific tool is it walks you through each phase of the framework, and it still functions. Our tools are built on GPT-4, which is currently $20 a month through OpenAI. But yeah, they're all built on GPT-4. So we're using its most advanced model, and it still functions like a chatbot. So even once you get the output, you can continue asking follow-up prompting and questions once you've gone through the automated prompts we created for you. You can get access to our tools on Academic Insight Lab. You can even try it out for a month for free. We have over 50 tools now, and this is just one of them. So we welcome you to try out our tools, try out this one, and please give us feedback. We meet every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, and we're getting feedback from our users so we can constantly improve and refine these tools. I'll check the time. I think we have some time for questions. Were there any in the chat that we didn't get to, Veronica? Or is anyone else have a question?
Yeah, no, I tried to, I called out the ones that were relevant as we were going through. Maybe, Jessica, just talk a little bit about the role piece, maybe, because I think that's the aspect of the prompting that is, I guess it took me a while to understand the importance of it.
Yeah, so with all of, I think I'll use the example of our tools because we have tools for different purposes. And so these chatbots, when you're using them for really any application that we're using them for, which is like feedback, as research assistants, teaching assistants, the more specific you are about its role and purpose. So all of our AI tools, like this one, we tell it upfront, your role is to help qualitative researchers develop and refine interview protocols according to Castillo-Montoya's framework. And because that framework came out in 2016, GPT-4 already knows that framework. And then we tell it its specific purpose. We've designed not all of our tools, but most of them, particularly the ones for doctoral students, so that they're not doing all the work for the user. We want this to still be your original, authentic research. And so we've also set parameters. And so we'll say, like, your role is to be a mentor and provide feedback, not do it for the student. So we provide a lot of parameters and information about the role and purpose. And then the personalized questions that you ask on the front end are what give it context. And then we specify the output. We tell it, okay, we want you to bold certain headings, list new questions on a line, number them, follow up with prompts. Sometimes we'll tell it to create tables. Yeah.
Jessica, we had one about quantitative methods. You want to mention the other session maybe, and some of the things that you suggest on that? Yeah.
Yeah, so we had a session this morning on the capabilities of ChatGPT for statistical thinking, and we used it to work through the statistical investigative cycle and had wonderful results. We also have an AI tool for methods chapters. It's very general right now. We're working on building out tools for very specific methodologies and research designs, because the more specific they are, the higher quality the output. But yes, they work really well. With that said, right now, the current version of GPT-4, on average, like 18 to 20% of its output is inaccurate. And there's a spectrum of that inaccuracy. Sometimes it's just very obviously off. Like there's a full-on hallucination where it'll suggest something that is just totally irrelevant. I see that. I'm seeing that less and less now. What's more likely is where it's inaccurate based on these like nuances of language. So a good example would be in quant. If you're conducting a correlational study, you might see some inaccurate language in the output that would suggest a quasi-experimental or experimental design. And so if you're not an expert and you don't realize the importance of those nuances in language for research design, then you might overlook that. And so that's why human oversight is so important. We have to really interrogate the output to make sure that everything it's suggesting is appropriate. And ultimately, we are responsible. ChatGPT, these large language models are not authors or co-authors. You're ultimately responsible for what you're putting out into the world.
Jessica, there was a question in the chat, one about images, right? And I know that you were saying something, you had some information about that. And then the other one is Christina's as well, the interoperability thoughts with other AI platforms. So I didn't know if you had anything to.
Yeah, so I'll suggest the image. So there's a couple things I'll say about images. So right now, GPT-4, and there was I saw a lot online yesterday about they're about to roll out a bunch of new features, but GPT-4, you can upload an image and there's a bunch of different things you can do with it. At the most basic level, I'll tell you what I did for this presentation. So one of our output screenshots was really blurry when we first wrote this manuscript, and I couldn't find the original chat history to take a new screenshot. So I uploaded the blurry image into ChatGPT-4 and I asked it to replicate it. So I would have a clear image that wasn't blurry, and it did it perfectly. It's pretty incredible. And so it'll do much more if you can just like take that and then think about what else you could do just based on that specific use. There are other tools outside of ChatGPT that are specifically made for images and video and speech. There's a lot, honestly, out there. I've played around with Dolly, Midjourney. I don't know specifically about 3D. I did see something yesterday, or not yesterday, a few days ago, about AI tools to create 3D images for like healthcare providers. If you join, so we have a Facebook group called AI Tools for Research and Writing. If you join that group, you'll see that we have conversations about this, and then that 3D image one was in there. In terms of interoperability, I don't know. I think what's challenging, so we're already starting to see platforms that are integrating lots of different aspects of this technology. So like Cite AI, they have smart citations, they contextualize citations. So they leverage GPT-4, but they also have their own sort of system for contextualizing citations using n-grams. And they are starting to have these API integrations with other platforms. So that's definitely in the works. We're going to start seeing a lot more sophisticated systems where you can have access to a lot of these different capabilities that are right now in separate tools. Yeah, I'm not sure if that totally answered your question, but
yeah, I think that's awesome.
Mhm.
Well, we
Everything
are
is just
over
going to
time,
get
but
better. Yeah.
yeah. Thank you all for being here. This was great. Um, as Jessica mentioned, the Academic Insight Lab has a plethora of resources as well as the tools that we've been designing. So definitely check that out and ever let us know if you ever need anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
Yeah.